Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about lists and tuples. List is an ordered and mutable data structure, and you can think of it as a container. By order, I mean that they maintain the order of their data without being jumbled. And by mutable, I mean that they are changeable. You can edit the list, insert elements, remove elements, and so on. So if I have a list example, it is created by using square bracket, and every element in the list is separated by a comma. So I have an integer here. I can also have a float, a string, and also another list. So let me have a more meaningful list called movies, which is going to contain some badass movies like Saw, Jurassic Park, Lake Placid, Up, Red. Since every element in the list is separated by a comma, you can see there are 5 elements in this list. Each element is a string here. If I want to access the first element, I have to use the list name, square bracket, and we specify the index here. Saw has an index of 0, Jurassic Park has an index of 1, Lake Placid 2, and Red, it's supposed to be red, not read. Trust me, I'm not a bookworm. So Red has index 4, and Red is the 5th element. Saw is the first element in the list with index 0. So if I save and run, it prints Saw. If I want to have Jurassic Park, it has index 1. So if I save and run it, it prints Jurassic Park. Now if I want to print the last element Red, I can use its index, which is 4, or I can use a negative index. If we want to access the string from the end, we use negative index. And since Red is the first element from the end of the string, we used a negative 1 to print it. So if I want up, I specify negative 2. So if I print it, it's up. So now if I want to access the first 2 elements from the list, I have to specify a colon here. So to the left side of the colon, we specify the beginning of the list from which we want to access from. So I want to access from Saw, which has index 0, and Jurassic Park has the index 1. So this is the index I want to access at last. So to the right side, we specify the end until which we want to get access. But this right side is exclusive, but left side is inclusive. So if I specify 0 here, element with index 0 is accessed. But at the right side, elements before the index specified are accessed, but not the indexed element. So if I want to access till index 1, I have to specify index 2. Even though index 2 corresponds to Lake Placid, it is not included, so only up to 1 is printed. So now if I want to access from Lake Placid till the end of the list, I have to specify 2 in the left side of the colon, which is the index of the Lake Placid, and 5, which is the index of the last item. Even though Red has index 4, I specify 5 here, and it is printed. So if I want, I can leave this place blank here. This defaults to access from the beginning of the string, and since I have specified the ending index as 5, this prints the whole list. And likewise, I can have the right index also blank. This accesses item from the index specified at the left, which is 2 from Lake Placid, and it goes to all the way to the end. If I don't have anything near the coin, it prints the whole list. So now let's add another badass movie to the list. So to do that, we use movies.append, and we pass the string we want to append, which is Johnny English. What a movie, right? So Johnny English is appended to the end of the list. Append only inserts at the end of the list. So what if I want to insert an element at the beginning or at anywhere we desire? So this is done by the insert method. I first have to specify the index where I want. So if I want to place my element at the beginning of the list has index 0, and now we want to specify the element. Let me specify interstellar here. So when we save and print it, we have interstellar at the beginning of the list. Hooray! So in order to see the list of methods that we can use on list, just print dir of list. Cut. So I've just showed you append and insert. Now let's see about removing elements from the list. They are pop and remove. So if I want to delete an element from the end of the list, I use movies.pop. So if I save and run it, red is no longer in the movie list. I can also specify an index inside the pop method to delete based on index. So if I want to remove saw, which has index 0, I specify 0. So now, what if I want to remove an element by just specifying the element name instead of an index? So this can be done by the remove method. So if I want to delete Jurassic Park, I pass it here. And boom, Jurassic Park is deleted from the list. It's an old movie anyway. Oh, let me have another list called even number and fill it with some even numbers. And for the sake of demonstration, let me repeat the number 2. We have the number 2 4 times here. So if I want to count the number of times an element occurs in a list, we use the count method. So just pass the element we want to count. It returns the count of the element in the list. So it returns 4. So if we want to find an index of an element, we use the index method. And we specify the element that we want to find the index of. So if I want to print the index of 10, I have to use index and pass 10. You can see that 10 is present in the 5th index in the list. Let me have a few random numbers. If I want to sort the list in ascending order, I just have to use the name of the list and use sort method. So now if I want to print in descending order, I just want to pass an argument called reverse is equal to true. So if I save and run now, it prints in descending order. I can also reverse the list using the reverse method. The last element becomes the first element and so on. So you can see the list is reversed. You can also sort the list which contains string. This sorting takes place in the lexicographical order. So I expect J should be the first word in the list. Yes, Jurassic Park, Lake Placid, Red, Saw, Up. So till now we had been altering the list in place. I just used the name of the list and the name of the methods. I didn't assign any variables to keep the result. So these are in place methods. Now, if I want to have a sorted list separately without altering the original list, so I can have a movies sorted list and I can use the sorted. pass reverse equal true for descending order. So if I print the original list and the sorted list, we get two different results. The first one is the original list and the second one is in the descending order. So let me compare it for now. We have a len method which is used to print the length of the list. So use len and pass movies inside it. So we have the length of the list as 5 and the even number list, it has 9 elements. So for a list that contains numbers, there are methods like min, max and sum. If I want the minimum number in the list, we use min of even numbers. So 0 is printed as it is the minimum value in the list. And I also have max, which prints the maximum value, which is 17 in the list. And the sum method, which just adds all the elements. So adding all the elements in the list, we get 48. So if I want to sort the movies based on the length of the movie name, like up has only 2 characters, saw has 3. So if I want to sort in this order of increasing length, I just have to use key equals len. So key accepts a function which is len here. So it works like it sorts seeing the len, like 2, 3, Jurassic Park has more than 10 characters. You can also specify a custom function which you created to define your own method of sorting. So if I print this, we can see up is first, saw has 3, red has 3, Lake Placid and Jurassic Park has the highest number of characters. So many times we may want to convert the whole list into a single string. So movies is the list of strings. So if I want to have a string called string form, I use the join method specifying what character should separate the contents of the list and pass the list I want to join. So if I print string form, I get a single string containing all the list elements separated by a hyphen. So if I want to change the string to a list, I have to use the split method. Since the elements are split by a hyphen in the string, I have to split the elements by hyphen. So if I save and run it, it has the list. So let me show you an important behavior of lists. Let me have a list called first list which contains some elements. And say if I want to copy the list to another list, I try by assigning like this. If I print it, they contain the same elements. But if I modify the second list, if I change the first number of the second list, this gets reflected in the first list as well. Even though I didn't touch the contents of the first list, it gets altered. The second list gets altered. This may be an unwanted behavior. If I want to work differently using the same list, this is not what I want. So a good way to copy it is to use the copy method. So this creates a new copy of the second list. So this results as expected. In order to understand why, let's print the ID of the two lists. You can see we have two lists referring to the same memory address. So when I alter any one of the list, it gets altered in the other list. But when I use copy, it creates a different object ID, and so it works as expected. If I have another list called A with few numbers, and if I include it in the first list by just using the value of the variable, this list then contains the contents of A. If I print, we can see the contents of A. Now if I change the value of list A, we can see it changed the second list, even though we used a copy of the first list. This is because it is a nested list. The copy doesn't include the list inside the list. So in these cases, we use deep copy. It is imported from copy library. So now if I use second list as a deep copy of the first list, you can see that the first list is affected since it is directly affected by A, but the second list is intact. It is now completely independent of the previous list. If I want to concatenate two lists, I can use the plus operator. We can see the contents of the first list is concatenated with the second list. But if I want to join a tuple, I will explain about tuples in a moment. We cannot use them with the plus operator. It shows an error, cannot concatenate list and tuple. I can try to use append, but it just appends the entire tuple instead of appending the elements of the tuple. So if I print the last element of the list, it prints the tuple instead of 3. So the good way is to use the extend method. You can also pass other sequences like list, tuple, and so on. So if we print it now, it works as expected. So here is the list of all the methods we just learned now. Now let's move on to tuples. As I mentioned, lists are mutable, they can be changed, but tuples are immutable. We use parentheses here rather than square brackets to create a tuple. So if I print it, we see it is a tuple. If I want to change the tuple element, it doesn't work. It shows an error. We can still access elements by index and slicing. Tuples also support length method, minimum method, max method, and sum method. We can also have strings and tuples. So let's see the methods supported by tuples. There is only like count and index. It doesn't have sort, reverse, and other methods we used in list. So why do we need to use tuples instead of lists? The reason is tuples are immutables, they are faster and have good memory usage. So let me prove that tuples are memory efficient. Let me get this code from my snippet. I have a range of numbers from 0 to 100. I used a list to store, and the next line I have the same numbers with tuples. So if I run the program, we see that the size of list is much larger than the size of tuples. As the data increases, this significantly becomes important. So now in order to prove that tuples are faster than lists, let me get another code to record the time to create them. I have a list of random numbers and I am creating it for 1,000,000 times. So I have a timeit function to record the time to do this process. And likewise, I created a tuple with the same element, same number of times. So now if I run this, we can see that the tuple is 10 times faster than list. So let me show you another application of tuples. Tuple unpacking. I don't need the parentheses to create a tuple. So if I have this code and print t, this creates a tuple. We can assign every number to a separate variable. These variables now are integers. The type of these variables are integers. So we can also swap two numbers. If I have x as 10 and y as 20, I can swap without any temporary variables, and we can see it is much simpler. So let's look at our previous example. While assigning this, the number of variables should be equal to the number of elements in the right. So assume we don't know how many elements the tuple contains. So let me add a few elements. And if I want to get only the first and last element from the tuple and ignore every other element in the middle, which I don't know the length of, I can use the star for the middle variable here. If I print first and third, it contains the first and last elements. If I print the second, it contains all the remaining elements from the middle. And one more thing, if I have a tuple A is equal to 10, and if I print the type of A, you can see that it is an class of integer type. Even though we have parentheses, it is taken as an integer. So for this we have to use a comma here. So whenever a tuple has a single element, we have to use a comma to make it a tuple.